in Washington D.C. and the KPRC executive members, Ms. Natsumi Ajiki, Ms. Lucy Musoyan, Mr. Servet Tosun, Dr. Christian Sinclair, and Mr. Serhat Demirkol for all their hard work to organize this conference in these difficult days. I believe we have chosen a venue that guarantees a successful conference at the political heart of the world. So recognition should also go to the National Press Conference, National Press Club, for hosting our conference today. Now, you all know who the HDP is, but many of you haven't heard of the KPRC. The KPRC is an independent, non-profit think tank based here in Washington, D.C. Through its in-house research programs and collaborative research network, it strives to identify national, regional, and global issues concerning the Kurds and carry out state-of-art political research policies to address these challenges. Now, the KPRC is also an advocacy organization, as it provides expertise and advice to U.S. policymakers and the civil society organizations in regard to the Kurds and the U.S.-Kurdish relations. And for further details about the KPRC, you can visit our website at kprc.us. Now, I would like to give you an idea of what you can expect and what we hope to achieve today over the next few hours. We are going to have 4 panels. 2 of them are going to take place before noon and another 2 in the afternoon. Each panel, of course, will be followed by Q&A sessions. Now, the theme of the conference is the Kurdish experience with democratic autonomy and self-governance within the context of the war in Syria and the developing situation in the broader Middle East. So inevitably, the presentations and the discussions will revolve around the fight against ISIS, the changing alliances and power struggle between the local and international forces vis-à-vis their interests in the Middle East, in the region, and of course the Kurds' effort to carve out an autonomous region for themselves in Rojava or northern Syria. Our panelists will offer their views on the root causes of the current political crisis in the Middle East and explore ways to find solutions. So I would like to thank all panelists for attending our conference and bringing their expertise to our gathering. As the scholars, the researchers, the political leaders, and the journalists, they have the vision, the knowledge, the ability, and expertise to help us pave our way into a bright future based on a peaceful coexistence. Throughout the conference, we ask you to stay engaged, keep us proactive, and help us shape the future. We please ask you to make sure that your phones are turned off, and if you have to make a phone call or if you have to take a phone call, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. I would like to thank the Kurdish Policy Research Center and the People's Democratic Party, HDP, for inviting us to this conference. In the midst of the war against ISIS, Pesmerga forces and the People's Defense Units, YPG, are considered the most effective forces in defeating ISIS. The United States considers Pesmerga and YPG as closest allies in the fight against ISIS. While the U.S.-led coalition provides air support and weaponry to Pesmerga and YPG, large territory in both Iraq and Syria been liberated by these forces. Our discussion will address the most recent developments on the battlefields in Syria. YPG's participation in liberation of Raqqa, the recent clashes in Khartoum between Assad's regime and the YPG forces, Turkey's prevention of the liberation of Jarablus, which is considered the most important target for ISIS to facilitate between Syria and Turkey, the needs of the Kurdish forces while battling the terror groups, and the United States should do to ensure the defeat of ISIS. It's also important to recognize the other terror groups which destabilize Iraq and Syria, such as Jabhat al-Nusra, Har al-Sham, Jaysh al-Islam, Naqshbandis, etc. I'm honored to present from Rojava region, northern Syria, Mr. Redur, who I'm trying to get his camera on now. Mr. Redur is the spokesperson of the YPG. Mr. Khalil has participated in several battles against ISIS. He is one of the military commanders who played a role in the establishment of YPG. He is a former journalist and published several articles about the Kurdish case. And also, I would like to present Mr. Kino Gabriel, a native Qamishli city in Rojava. He is a public relations officer and the official spokesperson for Syrian Military Council, MFS. He is also a military council member of the Syrian Democratic Forces. Unfortunately, due to last-minute scheduling changes, Mr. Jangi and Mr. Omar Saeed are unable to join us today. We are very excited to hear from our panelists here with us today. And now I will open up the panel with remarks from my guest. And each will have 15 to 20 minutes to brief us. Then we will take Q&A. And this session is on record. Mr. Redur Khalil's speech will be read by my colleague Abdel, and then we will let Mr. Kino present his speech, and then we will open up the panel for Q&A. We are very sorry, we have some difficulties with the internet over there. Okay, so Redur. It's very good. Mr. Abdel will read your speech, so stand by, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings from Rojava. We are grateful to the representation of People's Democratic Party, HDP in the United States, and the Kurdish Policy Research Center, KPRC, for this opportunity to speak to you. Struggle against terrorism, regardless of its source, be it ISIL or a certain nation state, requires commitment from communities and political forces for the terrorism, targeting the very values forming the essential ingredient of functioning societies. Kurdish people with their moral, cultural, political values side with tolerance, justice, and commitment to diversity and gender equality. Al-Qaeda affiliate Jabhat al-Nusra, ISIL, Salafist jihadi groups such as Ahrar al-Sham and Islam Army, the Islamic Front, and others. People's Protection Units, YPG, and Women's Protection Units, which include among their ranks Kurds, Arabs, Turkmens, Assyrians, and Chechens, scored finest bravery in responding to the terrorists who attack our areas brutally. The bravery presented and success achieved by YPG and YPJ can be understood on which one looks at the great imbalance in numbers of fighters and military equipment possessed by terrorists and defenders of human rights. ISIL has surfaced the most dangerous form of extremism, perversion, savagery, and terrorism after making gains against Iraqi and Syrian militaries. After ISIL gained more equipment and territory, it started targeting the Kurdish areas, YPG, in which people administer their own affairs. YPG and YPJ countered ISIL in all arenas, including Jazeera, Kobani, and Afrin, and inflicted enormous losses on ISIL despite the support of ISIL has been receiving from terrorist groups, mercenaries, Salafist jihadis, and the Turkish regime. The great resistance in Kobani area on the streets and alleys prevented Kobani from falling. The bravery presented by the People's Protest led by the United States for air support. The coordination between YPG and YPJ and the international coalition continued after Kobani, and the campaigns scored major victories against ISIL from Jazeera to Al-Abyad and Tishrin then. Recently, another campaign included Hall and countryside of Hasaka and ended later with liberating Shadali. The liberation of Tel Abyad has contributed to securing Kobani and enabled access to Ain Issa, south of Tel Abyad. The components, they made it only Syrian force effective fronted against ISIL and its sister organizations. Without people's support, these victories would not be possible and would not continue throughout the years. Despite thousands of fallen brave sons and daughters of the people, the support from the international coalition forces have also told the people that they were not alone, and the world was in support of their brave stand against ISIL and other terrorist organizations. As a result, I say, even if ISIL was dealt painful blows in Syria, it still possesses combat capability in some areas to carry out dangerous attacks and pose serious threat to stability. However, in order to fully degrade ISIL, the following steps are necessary. Due to the leading and important role of the Kurds in the war against ISIL in Syria, the rights of Kurdish people in the form of democratic self-administration in Syria needs to be supported. People's Protection Units needs to be given military, logistical, and closing in on ISIL by cutting off ISIL's main supply route from Turkey through Tel Abyad border crossing and threat ISIL's capital, Raqqa. Thanks. Redur.
Thank you. As you see, Mr. Kino Gabriel, I hope he hears us. Can you hear us? Okay, you can go ahead and brief us about what you have to say, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the council has to defend the interests of the Syrian people, Syrian citizens, to work closely with the other different Syrian forces to establish a new system for solutions for Syria in general. At the beginning, the Syrian people inside Syria goes back to a very long time history, and during the last 100 years, he faced different and a lot of oppression from the different regimes that have been ruling on Syria or in Islam. For that, it has lost its identity as an identity, I mean. It lost its culture, it lost its different, let's say, particular stuff that defines his existence as a people in general. The same happens in different areas in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Iran, in Turkey, in Lebanon, and the different areas of the Middle East. And that has different reasons, including one part of it is the different ethnicity that we belong, and the difference from the Arabs and the Kurds and the other components of the Syrian people. The other one is the religious part, which makes the Christian community is different from the world people that are living in the Middle East. For that, during the last, let's say, in particular, the last 100 years, it faced a different kinds of suppression after the general massacre and genocide that happened in 1915 with the fallen Ottoman Empire, where it lost lost a big part of its numbers. It came to a different kind of systems that ruled him in different ways and ignored his identity as a people, and that resulted in reducing his numbers and forcing him to immigrate from his homeland. The first time that the Syriac people was ignored his rights was during the Lausanne and France conferences and rights conferences in 1920 and 1923, where it was only referred to as a religious group and not as an ethnic group, and that made him lose his identity as a people. Following that, the different regimes that ruled in the different countries in the Middle East continued to deal with him in the same way, and that resulted in different kinds of suppression, killing, and forcing to migration, and that reduced his numbers in a big way in the Middle East. Nowadays, the situation that we are facing in Syria, especially after the uprising and the revolution that started in 2011, had a different and, let's say, dangerous effect both religiously and ethnically, and the Syrian people, as part of these people, have the same situation and same difficulties and dangerous. For that, he faced a different, or let's say, a dangerous situation that forced him to choose between his to continue his existence in his own homeland, or to immigrate and leave his home, and that would eventually result in, let's say, vanishing the Syrian people. For that, the Syrian Military Council chose not to have the same scenario that happened in other areas, especially in Iraq after 2003, where the Syrian people and the Syrian community in Iraq faced different kinds of suppression, from kidnapping, killing, attacking, and ignoring his, let's say, rights, both political rights and casual rights, the Iraqi constitution, and in the different he might have in Iraq. For that, he faced, we reached a level that we lost almost 90% of the Syrian people from Iraq after 2003, and that we can say in general that had a bad influence the world political situation even in Iraq. For that, we didn't want the same scenario to happen in Syria after. So that was the reason that the Syrian Military Council MFS was founded for, first place, to defend the existence of the people of the Syrian community in Syria, to prevent from being attacked and being suppressed by the different groups that are going to take part in the later Syrian crisis that we are seeing currently. For that, mission is set, and now we are only waiting for the world Syrian situation to turn into a different scenario that can reach a peaceful solution, a political solution that can accept the diversity of the political views of the ethnic components of the Syrian people, in order for all of them to be able to live together in harmony, in peace, and build their community and society all together. For that, we hope that the same situation that happened in Iraq to our people and to other groups in Iraq, especially the Yazidis that we had, that had a similar situation to ours, not to be copied and replaced back here in Syria to our community and to the other communities of Syria. What happened to our people here in northern Iraq, especially in Mosul and Kino plain, due to the attack of our people, neither the KRG nor the central government in Baghdad, and that resulted in the evacuation of our homeland in Iraq, both in Deir and in Mosul, and for a big part of our people to lose his home, to lose everything that he had, and to be displaced from his own, inside his own home. So for that, we are hoping the same scenario that happened, that is happening now in Syria to be copied completely. We had it, let's say, even in Syria, in Kabul, during the attack of ISIS last year, on February last year, over the Syriac and the Syrian villages of the Kabul area, and which resulted in the evacuation of an entire area from our people, the kidnapping of nearly 300 civilians from their homes, and not to be released a year later, and that had a brutal effect over our people and his faith over the system that is running in the area now, and the system that is running the Syrian crisis, which resulted in not being able to defeat or to work against those different terrorist organizations that are attacking the peaceful and the civilians in general, and let's say making the situation complicated inside Syria. Of course, that took control over some of our areas. These forces have been able to align with the US and the international coalition against ISIS, and during the last 6 months of their foundation, they have shown to the world and they have shown to the civilians in our area that they can, and they have been able to defeat ISIS in different locations, in different periods of time, starting from Al-Hud operation, towards Shaddad and some other operations, and that was a great success to the mission of the international coalition. It was a great success to our forces, along with our allies, especially with the US Army, that have been supporting our forces in different ways, starting from the airstrike that started fine in 2014, till the support that we are reaching, or we are getting from ammunition and other kinds of tactical support that we are very thankful for the United States that they are applying it. So far, our big part from, let's say, military forces, we are very convinced, and we believe that our mission is going to be accomplished, and this joint work and this alignment that we are having together, we want it to be a first step towards a more developed alignment together in order to defeat those terrorist organizations, especially ISIS and the other groups that are terrifying the Syrian people, that they are destroying the communities inside Syria. Our idea is to stop it, to build a new system, to build or to have a new vision for Syria, which we already are demanding it through our different political groups and parties, from the Syrian Democratic Council to the Federal Council that was announced recently, because we believe that the diversity of the Syrian people in different areas of Syria, one solution or a good solution for it is a federal system that can give the ability, the opportunity for those communities and those people to work together pluralistic let's say, constitution, a pluralistic solution for their problems, for their concerns, and for their ideas that they want to apply, and that would eventually lead to a peaceful solution to the war Syrian crisis. We have been asking for those goals or for those let's say demands to be taken in very serious consideration in order for us to be able to take part in the Geneva talks or Geneva peace process, in order to be able to give our ideas and to give our thoughts of solution in Syria, and that we have so far been denied from, even though we are taking good part in defeating and fighting against tyranny, against terrorism, against all the bad ideas that want to destroy our lives, to destroy our systems, and to destroy our way of living that we had before, and the way that we are having it now as different groups living together in harmony and working together to reach a better community and a better state for all of us. Finally, I just want to focus on one idea regarding the Syriac people in Syria. As an identity that lost its identity, it is now an opportunity the world wants to correct what went wrong 100 years ago, and to be able to recognize the genocide that happened against our people, to be able to recognize our identity as people, both us and because that where our rights were taken from us, especially in the Chinese Constitution in 1920. For that, it is an opportunity for the world, for the US and the entire international community to recognize those rights pretty closely with us in order to reach this solution for the Syrian people, for the Kurdish people, for the Arabs, for the entire Syrian people, in order to have opportunity to deal with the situation and crisis that we are facing now, and reach different levels of the solution. And that will happen only when we work together very closely, and when we acknowledge each other's role, each other's existence, and that would eventually lead to a solution that works in the best way for us. Thank you very much for your listening and for this opportunity that you gave me. Thank you very much.
Mr. Redur, are you still with us? Ask you a question in regards of your briefing. I just want to know, are there any efforts to expand your forces within the Christian communities? Do you reach out to more Christian communities other than the Syriac, maybe Assyrians?
Of course, for us, when we say Syriac, it means a different Christian community, and it involves the whole almost the entire Christian community inside Syria. Other than the Armenians, the other Christian churches in Syria are all Syriac, including the Orthodox and Catholic Syriac Church, the Assyrian Church, and the Maronite and other Christian communities that live in Syria. When I talk about Syriac, I mean the ethnic group, not the religious one. So for that, we already have 5 groups from other Christian communities, including the Assyrians, the Gabriel, the Maronite, and we are working very closely with different Christian and Syrian groups in other parts of Syria, including Aleppo, Damascus, where our people opposition groups that they deny rights and that deny existence. For example, it was only during Iraq a month or two, a big number of the Syrian community in Latakia and Homs were kidnapped. Some of them were killed. So that was a way to suppress all people and force them to leave or to leave without his right to Syria.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go back to Mr. Redur. I hope I will get his camera on. Mr. Redur?
Yeah, thank you.
Can you turn on your camera, please, so we have a big crowd here to see you? Mr. Redur, would you tell us a little bit, please, about your last liberation of in late December of 2015? You have liberated Shireen Dam, then you stopped your operations. Are these strategic plans to continue and to reach Manjab, is to connect the Rojava region, or is Turkey opposed to this idea of you to liberate Manjab since they did with Jarablus? Could you tell us a little bit about that pocket, please?
Mesela Jarablus مسألة كي إذا كمشكلة تدرس مسألة كي بوليتيكا اللي ولاية كمسألة كمعلومات يعني أجابوا بالتوافق كنا نكوي السد فرنسا كرنا ويهرم قانون لها كرنا كناية شيء كنا رزق كرنا دراسة يعني كان مخاطبة كنا تشويه نكسر
Can the translator please to translate for us?
Jarablus rebellion is becoming political issues, so the liberating of the Jarablus city need agreement between the national forces to be able to liberate this area or going the west of Jarablus. زي كده دولة تاريخ وتسجيلها أصلية تركيا تكتب دولة تركيا من ناحية ممكن تقول كتابة مميزة كتير دراسية كتير وعلى ما تفسير سر دولة تركيا مقابل كثيرة فقط كتابة دولة تركيا بقولنا كيف دراسية كمان مجالات نورسوي ده لكن السوريا وهي تخبريك وأن تركيا شبكة كلها لأن تركيا هبون صفوية كيكودي وجماعة المية السياسية والرواية وفايدة شدة كي نعطي شكنا بأول مكان وهي تجي ومصدوقنا كي كودي بردنا وصلا ذلك ومن problem for us to liberate Jarablus is Kurdish government because Turkish government saying Kurdish autonomy in Jarablus as a government conflict, but we say our existence in Jarablus is normal because we are Syrian forces and we're fighting in Syria territory and we've not made anything because Turkey was like said before, Turkey rather from the existence of Kurdish forces in this area.
Okay, I will have one more small question. Recently there was clashes in between you and Assad's regime in Qamishli, and you have liberated a few neighborhoods in Qamishli. After the ceasefire between you and Assad's regime, would you give back the liberated area back to Assad's regime?
Yeah, ويريد بالقاموس وشكل تكون تصوير خاص جارك يتم معي طبيعي هذا بيشتهي أكثر تكون سياسي وجداري بالقصص أصلا لا يكفي صارت فقط
برواجه دينيزي هم هزم أصلاً هم هزم يتجهم أجر قامتودا دولة استراتيجية جاية كشدولة تيجي كلا كلا فازنها بيكون دولة جالية هزم بس أصلاً بس ممكن أن جاي كثير وكثيرا تقول الجماعة. Syrian regimes or Kurdish forces, moderated, some rated. The regime wants to send a message to the community, especially after the European talks. The House of Participants talking, but opposite, Assad forces and YPG could deliver the strategic point from the regime forces, so it's not possible to come back this point to regime forces.
So you're not giving back the lands you liberated from the regime? No.
No, يعني جارسيا نازل هذا مش كذا وما هذا procedure كذا كذا. No, we will not back to them, but maybe we take another place.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll open up to Q&A. We'll start with you, please. Who's helping with Mike? Stay with us. We will open up the panel, Mr. Kino, Mr. Xelil, for Q&A.
Yes, my name is Jonathan Redur from Newsweek magazine. There have been reports lately about aid that the Russians are giving the Kurds, the YPG, and also to the Afrin Kurds in Syria. I was wondering if he could talk about that aid, what particularly the Russians are giving them, and does he wish the United States would give him more?
Mr. Xelil? الرسالة هو دلنا شرب رابورت كي هذا دبر عفرين كإيوا هاريكاري روسيا تنبوهية إيوا آية بيوستنا بهاريكاري أمريكا زياتر شاور روشي عفرين أقرب ما باسكي.
يعني بيكم هل هذا تجي كلوري يقول خاص بالكارير بالفقط بس طبعا يعني هذا بس كان يعني الشيء ما ده يكون أرمان صار تمشي كلوري كشيء كده فقط هذا الموضوع في بالكارير يكون أصلا دون كاس فرق ما بين كم يوم فماذا فقط أصبحت تيجي بجم ولو كان كتم السيدة ويعيش لساتيون ما ترانسيونال ما تريد أولي تفصل عقلية تفصل على كارثة فقط ترانسيونال ما تريد أولي تفصل كسب نبض بيته لكن كذا وقع عقلية ممكن يكون مدرسية استقامة في على كارثة تستقبل أسرار كبر غير and it was who fight against ISIS, if they want give us food or help, there is no problem with us. But officially there is no system between us and the Russian forces. And when the darkness of Afrin areas, we officially applied to international coalition to protect Afrin from the different groups attacks, but unfortunately we do not give any help from international coalition.
As you know, gender equality is one of the valuable features of the society that you are trying to build. And can you explain a little bit how how you guys approach that, especially towards some traditional tribes like Xelil or Arab tribes that they are traditionally not really gender equality friendly.
Khalid, did you hear the question? Okay. It's about the gender equality in Rojava and the efforts that you have done. يعني ما في افريقيا لرجعوا وبتايبت تبعت شيء عشائريه هي شلون هالصوره ولا قالوا بعضها
أظن معلومات لازم الاثنين أصلا كرياتك وإذا العسكري سرسة شل بين جبتك إيقا في شناطي نقط فرصة حلوة الحريم الراسة التي عندك شو مميزين شيء هذا فقط يولي فرصة يكالورة وجزوبة الراسية مجبورة تجيب وين عشان وين قوانين أساسية قوانين سياسية قوانين جواكي وين اللي كنت تشتكي من مان تروح اللي كنت شناسية كنت مثلا ويجي resolution is the woman resolution who led this resolution is the woman. As I want to give you one information about people protection unit. Which will using a 45% is woman. So people in Rojava have passed this principle and this woman, the distance of woman between YPG is someone who can say it's failure for Kurds.
45% of white beating forces are Yapaja or are women. We have it recorded, maybe we'll get it more in detail. We'll do the translation, if you don't mind. Yeah, please.
My name is Hasan. I heard twice from Mr. Redur's report about the Turkish government's involvement in the Jarabulus liberation and securing the border between Jarabulus and Azaz, which is the main of the ISIL support comes from there. My question is, what is exactly is the involvement of the Turkish regime in this case? Are they supporting ISIL or they are supporting the liberation groups in northern Syria?
هذا باسي أولك توماسي جرابوسة كنا قل عزاز دوجا دلت بوشوني تركيا تدخلي تركيا ومسألة أوديو شوانا لسات شاء أستيقا رجال تركيا دعمي داعش كندا سوريا أبي توزيك نسأل باسي ما بوكي
Že bez tega škoraša Syrije samozřejmě dawlata Turkiye jezik udělal, to musla ahráša Haridawishi Daesh. Siyukre dawlata Turkiye domanı kısımlara emiş boyun kadrovan, şu muhatnavan vekiller ve hazarat insanın diyari eşkili Daesh Hasan güngeri en Syria Türkiye'de arası Suriye'de ve استطاع استخدام هذا وزار مطار اسطنبول انقره الى وسط اذا كانت بديل ايجابيه اسقاط كده ولا في قصير هذا كان وهذا المفروض اللي عم Kurdish housing area. Lekker weer maken, dit is productie weer maken en niet in kan dat in het community, no matter what country. Yes, it tries to say that the Turkish government had a very assistance to many or small groups. Not from now, before they given assistance to small based Islam and how ISIS all the border between Turkish government and the different groups are open for them, for many people, for different movements. We have thousands of passports of ISIS or different groups who pass from Turkish border to Syria, by ISIS, other groups. So Turkish from the beginning helped these groups. So to start with, and in this area, they can do as possible as they can do.
Okay, I need a question for the second now. Any Christian related question or a Syriac? Please. Mr. Kino, you still with us?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, this question is for you.
Fabrice Balanche from the Washington Institute. I would like to ask you, after Shedade, are you going to Terrorism? Because I know that you are about 30 kilometers at the north of Terrorism, and if you reach Terrorism, you can cut the road between Raqqa and Mosul, and it will be more easy after to go to Raqqa.
Are you going to go to Terrorism, Mr. Kino? Did you get the question?
Yeah, I couldn't hear completely, but if you can repeat it to me just briefly.
Give the mic. Please repeat the question. Sorry, repeat the question about
I would like to know if after Shedade, the Yabaga and the SDF forces are planning to go to Terrorism and to cut the road between Raqqa and Mosul before to go to Raqqa and to go more on the west.
So, Mr. Kino, after Shaddad, are you planning to go to Terrorism?
This is part of the Democratic Syrian Forces plan, but again, this task, I think, will have some delays starting from Shaddad. We are hoping to be able to liberate the different areas in Raqqa province first, to the southwest, at the beginning to the south of Salabiya's area. Again, we are hoping to be able to take control over areas like Jerablus, Manbij, and Azad in order to cut the supplies from ISIS or the ISIS supplies from Turkey and the other, let's say, radical Islamic groups that they are getting support from Turkey, as Mr. Redur said. We are hoping to be able to do that in order to facilitate our mission to liberate Raqqa, and of course Terrorism is a big, or Terrorism has a big part and a big role for our mission, and it would be in our future plans that we are preparing to liberate almost all the area to the east of Euphrates River. For that, as we already have Arab groups inside SDF that they are originally from their zone, it is 100% part of our plan, and just waiting for the different levels of our plan to be accomplished, and their zone will be a part of it.
Thank you so much. We'll take the last question from President Omar, please.
Yeah, hi, Ken Timmerman. I'm with the Foundation for Democracy in Iran. I wonder if you could comment on the impact of U.S. training for the Islamist groups. The Obama administration has said several times that it has been providing training to the so-called moderate Islamist fighters, and after they are trained, they tend to desert and go over to ISIS. Could you talk to us a bit about the impact of that U.S. training for the Islamist groups? Thank you.
تأثیری امریکا هریکاری چند گروهی اسلامی در سوریا آیا امد تأثیری چون بود نتیجه چون بود که اداره اوباما چند گروهی اسلامی هیا امد دعم یکن توضیح من نسر رو بباس کردیم ونمی
خلاص مخابن يعني جبوي ملاحظة وبوزيشن يعني مغالطة في سوريا هزم أمريكي كان جروبا أمريكي في تأثير حلبة ربما أنا كمان مثلا تركيا تبقى يسيروا دولتين زنكي وسلطان مراد وانا كميزيكي كميزيكي فقط وكيفاً جروب وتزيد تجربة فابريكا سوريا كديمقراطية ما في هكذا كده هذا الشيء كبرنامج دكتوراه هذا نتيجة كمسألة فابريكا تمام حلب سلاسل مائة حاصل كبيرة السلاح الجرام يتوفر كنت عليه وان جروبا أما كمية ديال ذلك هي ديال كمان جنوب قناة دي أمريكا كذا عبارة عن تفاصيل
Yes, and unfortunately it's high. The USA training some groups in the north of Aleppo, like in the country on the Sultan Right, and then trying to Turkey on the very points to USA. But these groups do not accept democratic Syria, and doesn't accept another close to Syria or the other continent, and they are enemy and they the people in Syria not having what is program with a heavy weapons. So we want to use them to see these groups again on the policy with these groups.
Since the connection wasn't really good, I will make sure that all the response and the questions will be written and will be posted on the website. That way will be clear, especially for my translation and the others, and will be a statement from them rather than us. And I know the connection wasn't helpful, and I really appreciate your patience with us. And if you join me to thank our speakers, we lost one. Please stay around for our next panel. Thank you so much.